This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you by Language Blend, the new best way to learn Spanish. Language Blend focuses on what you actually need to live and get by abroad with daily one-on-one lessons, a dedicated texting partner. It's like living in a Spanish-speaking country without ever leaving home. Go to languageblend.com for more information. Welcome back to another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. Today, I have two special guests for you. I have Jake Nomada here, and I have our mutual friend Mauricio from Outbound, Mexico, a leading tax and legal firm based in Mexico City. Jake, Mauricio, how you guys doing?
I'm great. Thanks, Vance.
Yeah, doing good. Glad to be here, fellas.
Awesome. We're doing a bit of a deep dive on the expat scene and controversies around being an expat in Mexico. And Jake Nomada, who many of our listeners will know, recently went viral in Mexico, which he tends to do about every 3 months, and gets me canceled by association. But Jake recently went viral talking about a potential exodus of expats from Mexico. Went a little bit viral, and Jake's hopped up to kind of talk about it and his thoughts on the whole situation, everything. So we're starting off with the tweet, talking about the tweet.
Yeah, so I tweeted out something. I was on modafinil one Sunday afternoon and was scheduling my tweets for the week and just put, I was kind of noticing, was looking at some of the exchange rates, et cetera. I'm like, shit, Mexico's, the peso's gaining, right? And I was kind of thinking, if that continues, there is a breaking point where like gringos can't afford Mexico. And so I tweeted something to that, like at 10 pesos to the dollar, which Mauricio has repeatedly said that's not going to happen most likely due to the interest rates and the central banks, et cetera, et cetera. But I didn't think it was something offensive. I was just saying, for most gringos, if their prices were to double in Mexico, because Mexico is the 15th largest kind of economy in the world, right? And it's growing. And I don't see, if the peso is 10 to the dollar, not 20 to the dollar, I don't see prices plummeting in Mexico to accommodate gringos because there's a lot of, Mexicans that have a lot of money. And so I don't think those prices are going to go down in pesos. And so the whole point of that tweet was that, if a gringo is in Mexico spending $3,000 or $4,000 a month on their living expenses each month, and now they're spending $6,000 to $8,000 a month, some of those people, and that's post-tax income, some of those people can't afford that. And they might leave and they might go to other places down further south where they can afford. And I didn't, when I scheduled that tweet, there was no intention to go viral. There was no intention to piss off thousands of people. But that's what happened. So that's kind of the backstory of the tweet.
Mm-hmm. And it's true that there is competition among vacation spots for most Canadians and Americans. I feel like there's been a flavor of the month every couple of years. Costa Rica was big for a while. Dominican was big for a while. Mexican's been big recently. And with COVID and I guess just how open it is, that would obviously be the number one factor, just how open it was over the past couple of years since 2020. So Mexico's definitely reclaimed number one spot. Nobody I talk to wants to even go to the Caribbean. Everyone just wants, or a random Caribbean island. Everyone just wants to go to Mexico.
Yeah.
So it's definitely the spot.
Well, and it's interesting because, like you said, I think it goes in waves with travelers, digital nomads, whatever you want to call them, right? Where there is a different flavor every couple years. But I think the biggest difference recently has been Mexico remained open during COVID. And I think, for me personally, and for a lot of people, which is a very small subset of people visiting and living in Mexico, that was a huge deal to see this country is basically standing up to some of these international powers and saying, we're just going to keep doing what we do. And, I think a lot of foreigners really gained an appreciation and a respect of the country and of the culture due to that fact that they were a little bit, quote unquote, I don't know, rebellious. Is that a way to put it, Mauricio?
I wouldn't call it that. but sure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Go
and
on.
it obviously was by state, right? Like there were certain places in Mexico, like the United States, that did
I
things
mean,
differently.
I remember back in 2020, the entire rationale of keeping it open was not some sort of libertarian political debate around what should be done around
Just to put food on the
masks.
table.
Yeah, it was 30% of Mexico's GDP is associated with tourism. So I mean, what you're just going to shut that down? I mean, all these families, they live in the informal tourist economy, selling stuff at beaches. Right now, I'm at Expat, is so cool, and there's so many fa- families that live off it. So what, you're just gonna throw them under the bus? No.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't think, but Americans confuse that, especially the Twitter folks, and so
Yeah.
anything that aligns with their political like worldview, kind of like fits into that, and so they kind of spin it. The Mexican government was just so much. There was such a large backlash back in 2020 and 2021 over why they shut down the country for tourists,
Hmm.
and from the Mexican perspective. And so what then started happening in 2021 is that all these nomads really came into Mexico, and so that converged
I
with
was there,
inflation.
bro. I was
Yeah,
there. We were
yeah.
there,
You
bro.
you were there. You
Bro, it was sick.
yeah. And so that converged with inflation, and that created kind of a situation where locals really got pissed off, saying, I mean, but I think I'm getting kind of ahead of myself. But that's just kind of the background of
Hmm.
how we got here.
Right. And it's funny. So tourism, 30% of the economy, exporting is huge as well. Both of those two things would favor a weaker peso. So I think that
Yes.
speaks to that they will probably want to keep it weak. Jake, I'd love to just return to how, your thing, your tweet struck a nerve with people. What were some of the impacts of that? What kind of feedback did you
Oh
get?
Oh
Uh,
god, the hate was horrible. I
yeah.
was I was all over those tweets.
Did it? Yeah. So first off, let me go back to just for like 10 seconds what Mauricio just said about like the gringo perspective of what Mexico was doing versus the reality is that the government was basically acting in a very utilitarian manner, and that they're trying to keep food on the table of a large percentage of the population. And obviously, the gringos and the foreigners are seeing this from a libertarian perspective, like, oh, this country is, maybe not rebelling, but they are acting as normal in a sense. And
Yeah.
that obviously got confused a little bit. But even if it did get confused, I think that played a role
but your
to a certain
tweet, your
extent.
tweet wasn't really about 2020 or how open the
No, it
country
was
is.
about
It
how
was all
expensive it
about it
was
was
getting.
all about expensive
Yeah.
and currency and gringos leaving. And I guess people care if gringos leave. Or like, what's
Well,
They
according to the
do.
feedback, there was a lot of people that wanted gringos to leave, and there was some really, I mean, there was hilarious feedback. Like one guy was like, "Remote jobs are fake work, and I hate gringos and I hate phrases," and I was like, "All right, that's a unique take." He was like, "I don't think remote work is real. Like only doctors and engineers are real workers," and da 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 da. I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes zero sense. But no, there was a lot of feedback. Gringos go home. There was a lot of there were two types of DMs I got. One was like "fuck you," "vete a la verga," all that type stuff, and and then there were a few people that were like, death threats, "I want to kill you," blah blah blah, all that stuff. And then the weirdest, DMs, because obviously I couldn't even keep up with all the quote tweets and the comments. Like I think there ended up being like thousands and thousands until I deleted the tweet. Um, but the weirdest one to me, and this is the one that I didn't understand, was I would have like educated men, like Mexican men, fluent English, have a
Oh
professional
yeah.
degree, doctor, lawyer, et cetera, complaining to me about their salaries when I'm like, I am a gringo living in Mexico. I have absolutely zero control over your salary, and you wanting to put that blame on me, or I don't even know it. And I wanted to be sympathetic and empathetic to a certain extent, but at a certain point, I'm just like, dude, you're a 40-year-old dude. Like, like your financial situation is you're a grown ass man, right? And so some of that stuff was a little weird to me because it's like, if you're 22 living in Mexico
Yeah.
City or in some beach town, and it got super expensive the past 3 years, and you're just finishing up college and whatever, I get that. You're a 40-year-old grown ass man, like, you have to take responsibility for your life, no matter if you're born in Canada, United States, Mexico, wherever, right? So there was some stuff like that was hard for my mind to comprehend at a certain level. So,
I think that Jake unwillingly became the symbol of what's being called gentrification. I mean, if you say that Roma Condesa is gentrified by gringos, well, yeah, of course, but that specific part of the city was already being gentrified by white rich Mexicans. So why? I mean, why? What's the big fuss about? The people complaining about gentrification, and this is what I was talking with Jacob. Is this is like upper middle class liberal urbanites that somehow feel affected by this, but Mexicans from all other parts of life are not really complaining about this. So I
Where do you
wouldn't.
think it came from, Mauricio, if I could ask? Because
I
where do you
don't
think
know.
they all got this idea to be like gentrificación, mala?
we go home.
I
Where did this
mean,
come from?
we Mexicans are all forced on a specific education system, which kind of does what other Latin American countries do. That kind of blames the USA, like low key blames the US for a lot of our problems. Which we can have a debate over that. I don't want to get into that. That's a huge topic.
That might be all right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that might be a whole different podcast. But it's kind of, I mean, it's kind of nailed into our heads in our small age that gringos are not to be trusted. And so,
You
I
think
mean,
so? Really?
yeah, of course. I mean, politically, they're not to be trusted. We like them in a personal kind of way because they're cool. We like their media, we like their kind of culture, but we don't really like them coming here and engaging in economic activities because that's somehow equivalent some sort of exploitation of a poor country and society. And so it's kind of a mixed feeling. We love their dollars. We love them coming here and showing interest for Mexican culture and investing here. Uh, but at the same time, we don't want them to integrate so much into Mexico because that somehow is a colonizer experience. It's a really weird political
Yeah.
mentality that a lot of guys have here, and I think Jake unwillingly tapped into that without
Yeah.
him quite knowing what he was getting himself into. Because
Yeah.
if you guys follow Spanish Twitter, like Mexican Twitter, this is huge. I mean, the gentrification debate is huge in there in
Is it?
Spanish. Yeah, it's huge. I mean, everyone's talking about that.
Yeah.
But again, what I'm really amazed is that there hasn't been a direct interaction until Jake's tweet. The Mexicans were not interacting with the gringos, although they were living in the same city or the same country until now, and that was a very violent and yeah
Well,
and
and when
yeah
I mean, the way I put it, I want like one of the when I woke up the next morning after the tweet went out and I checked, I'm like, holy shit, I got a lot of notification. And so I actually started responding to him. I didn't think it was going to go so viral, but there were like a couple hundred quote tweets. And I started responding to it, and there were like you said, like these white. I don't think "frace" is not a derogatory term, is it?
yeah no. I mean, in we Mexicans like to think that there's no racism in Mexico, but that's just a bunch of BS. And so I think you can use white.
Okay, yeah. So there was
Keep
like
it
a
in.
bunch of like white Mexicans, very good English levels, right?
Yeah.
Commenting on it, and I was like, man, like these people are acting like a gringo renting an Airbnb in Condesa is the return of the conquistadores, and I think
Yeah.
that pissed off
Exactly.
some
Exactly.
people too. And I was like, the gringo comes down, rents an Airbnb for 2 or 3 months, Mexico City, what 8 times out of 10, that's where most of these remote workers that don't have a lot of experience in Latin America are deciding to live for 2 or 3 months. And it was like a freak out. And like you said, Condesa, Roma Norte, Polanco, which Polanco is not really that affected, but those places have been like quote unquote touristy for probably a decade now, maybe a little bit longer. Because I had friends living there when I first started traveling in 2014. And so that's not like really anything too new. The new thing is that the rents have gotten so much that the fresa white Mexican girls or guys that are parents are giving them 25 or 30,000 pesos a month to go live in Mexico City during university can't afford
Yeah.
it. That's
Exactly. Yeah.
that's who it's affected by, right? And so it was interesting to see like, but then it's funny because in a lot like I said, the guy that was saying no, we hate fresas too. You know, if there's no gringos involved, that kind of anger sometimes goes towards the classes in Mexico, right? But
Oh
when
yeah. Yeah.
Fresa is mad at a gringo, then everybody's mad at a gringo, and so that's kind of why it was funny.
Yeah. I mean the which I mean the common folk would say, we hate the fresas and goes. And then the fresas are no longer at the upper echelons of society. They're no longer the ones with more like capacity to spend money, which is a trend I think we'll see a lot in the future. I personally think gringos are going to be the next some sort of economic elite in Mexico, especially the ones that stay in and do business here, because they know they have access to a lot of international connections that Mexicans simply do not. Yeah, I
And
think
Mexico
that's
tends
going to
to
happen,
attract
and Mexicans
human
see that
capital.
coming, and they don't like that. And
Yeah,
the Fresas see it, and they see this as their country, as their turf. You can't
yeah.
just come in and take it. Um, so yeah, I think that that's the undertone of this whole thing. I mean, what's going to happen with Mexican integration in North America? It's a debate that
It's going to
runs deep.
integrate more.
It's going to integrate even more.
I mean,
A
it's
lot of our clients are having their kids here. I mean, just look at Jake.
yeah. I mean,
Um, so they're gonna stay, and then what's gonna happen? They're not just longer tourists. They're part of a society. So
yeah.
how
Well, well, and it's interesting too because there. I kind of did some research on it. Like Mexican economy is the 15th largest economy in the world, and I
yeah
think those trends moving forward with more nearshoring, more manufacturing. Obviously, the tourism sector has blown up, and I don't. I mean, I don't see that slowing down. Like there's a real case in the next what I mean, I'm not an economist, so correct me if I'm completely off base, but there's a real case Mexico is a top 10 economy in the world in the next like 10
yeah
years, right? So it's like there is a lot of money in Mexico and there are a lot of wealthy people. Um, so it's on one hand there are going to be more gringos here and there is going to be some gringo money coming in. On the other hand, it's going to create a lot of opportunities in many industries, and those wealthy Mexicans are going to capitalize on that,
yeah
even if they have some gringo partners, et cetera, like they're going to capitalize on those opportunities. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but I do think your point of there are a lot of gringos living here now, and they are starting to integrate far more into Mexican society, I think, than they
Hmm.
used to because
It's
people
easier
are
now.
getting into relationships,
yeah
people are having children, people are purchasing real estate, planning to spend 6 to 12 months a year here, et cetera, et cetera. And it's going to become similar to I think certain parts of Mexico long term will become similar to certain parts of California, Texas, those southern states
I mean,
where,
it already does. You
yeah,
look at Monterrey, San Pedro Garza Garcia, some parts of Tijuana. I mean, it's all American. It looks American.
yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, you're going to see that mesh of where you might, I mean, I don't know the timeline, but in 10 to 20 years, somewhere in Texas might feel and seem very similar to a similar style city in Mexico that's been quote
yeah,
unquote gentrified, right? Like you're going to see that mix, and I get the issues some people had with it, but on the other hand, to be upset at you know a gringo being upset at a Mexican that they're in California or Texas, or a Mexican being upset at a gringo that they're in Mexico, it's like the reality is our governments are the ones that have the control to put a stop to that, and the economic benefit to both countries, it's just not going to happen, and it's out of the control of me, you, or any other person, individual, right? So
yeah.
it was kind of a weird argument because I'm like,
Hmm.
if you really hate me, go talk to the government and kick me out. Like the government can just say all foreigners have, it's not that difficult. But there's just so much economic benefit to both countries. It's not going to happen.
I think a valid debate around this, because that's always the argument that these people put out is they're not paying taxes. That's the main, and I would say neither are you. I would bet that neither you're paying. No one in Mexico pays tax. I mean, that would be my first counter argument, and the second one is, they do have a point. I mean, because the current tax structure in North America is not designed. Remote work and then the new things that we're seeing were never in the scope of these guys. I mean, it was already always thought that you would make your income in the same place as you would live. Of course, that was obvious, and that's not the case anymore. So
Well, and I was doing some research on that. I was like looking at some of the VAT taxes and the hotel taxes and Airbnb taxes. I'm like, Mexico does a pretty good job from a government level of getting tax money from tourists on a
oh yeah,
tourist visa. Like, they
Airbnb
know
tax is
tourists are
high.
going to stay in an Airbnb
yeah,
or a
yeah,
hotel. They have a tax on that. They know, VAT tax, et cetera, et cetera. Like they do a decent job, if not a good job, of getting tax money from the tourist industry. I think what the people were saying is that the people that are living in
income
Mexico,
tax.
yeah,
I mean,
and then that goes back to the government level again with the tax treaties, et cetera, of you know how all that works, and obviously that gets into a whole another complex topic. Um, but it'll be interesting to see because I don't like. Obviously, I think Mexico has the biggest. I don't want to say issue, but it's obviously there's more foreigners working remotely in Mexico than anywhere else in Latin America, maybe anywhere else. I mean, Thailand probably is more so, but you've got
yeah,
a ton of remote workers here, and the current government infrastructure is essentially like, all right, you're here on a tourist visa or a temporary resident or a permanent resident. There's a tax treaty in place, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's I mean, I get the point on that. That's obviously again at the government level. I still disagree with it because the idea that taxes are benefiting the people that need benefit the most. I mean, I'm personally not a big government is Robin Hood type individual. I don't. I think we've seen throughout history that's not the case. But that seems to be, like you said, a pretty common talking point of locals versus remote workers.
Well, the fact is, if they implemented more stuff, or the Mexican SAT was more heavy handed, that would be a deterrent to digital nomads working there. So it's kind of it's cause and effect. If they if you want to like integrate people into the tax system, a lot of people might not go for that, and they might have other options somewhere else, maybe in Central America, somewhere else in Latin America, somewhere in the Caribbean. There's lots of jurisdictions out there.
The
So
Paraguay Bros.
Yeah, the Paraguay.
Those
I mean,
guys.
all
Oh, I
the,
hate them.
yeah, yeah. Well, and it's interesting too. Like you said, like if the tax regime for digital nomads or remote workers, etc., would get heavy handed, how would that affect people staying here? For example, so it's an interesting topic
I
that
mean,
we
there's a
could
lot
dig.
of places with palm trees and ceviche on the beach and all
Yeah,
that. You don't have to go to
I think
Mexico.
it's cool, but we're not that special. You can get a
Well,
lot of
and it's
things that you get.
interesting because, like we've talked about Mexico and how gringos perceive how they handle COVID, but there's also a factor that I don't think a lot of Mexicans understand why gringos really are starting to move to Mexico. It's just so convenient. Like Mexico has the infrastructure that nowhere else in Latin America currently has. And so you have online shopping in Mexico, Mercado Libre, Amazon
Yeah,
Mexico, Rapid Turbo, like those things work at a level in Mexico that you cannot. That's harder to find in other places in Latin America. And then on top of that, I get some pushback on this sometimes, but I do think due to the proximity, Mexican and American culture is not that different compared to like American and Bolivian culture.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're right on the most part. I grew up with gringos all my life. You know, I went to a private school, and so because of all the manufacturing investment that there was in my city, uh, a lot of the families of the people that they sent to like teach the Mexicans on how to do a lot of the work were Americans, and that caused, at least in me, that specific thing made me realize that we're not that different at all. It's not. I mean, a lot of cultural misconceptions. What I think it's the most important, really, I mean, it's very basic. The divide is caused because of the language.
Yeah,
That's all. I mean,
yeah,
if that's all, if gringos knew Spanish or Mexicans knew English, th- this debate would not be happening because we would learn that the difference that occur are, I mean, the cultures have been integrated to a level that it doesn't really matter. The
yeah,
small like misconceptions that gringos have of Mexicans and Mexicans have of gringos are absolutely not true. They simply do not talk to each other.
yeah.
So it's a really, it's not, this should not be a debate. It is in Twitter, because in Twitter everything is a debate.
Everybody's bad.
But yeah, but in here, I mean, in real life, I think there's a lot of curiosity from both sides of knowing how Mexican culture is, and why there's this strange phenomena that you find in Mexican culture that you don't find in other places. And Mexicans have this kind of, very like sick curiosity of how American life is. For example, there's this huge trend right now of Mexicans wanting to go to Canada for some reason. I don't know why, um, but there's this. Yeah,
That
it's
doesn't
like,
that makes no sense because I see Mexicans when it's 65 degrees out in like a fucking winter jacket. Like that's like
oh
summertime in
yeah,
Canada.
yeah.
Like,
I mean, I'm here in Extapa. It's the heat is on fucking. It's horrible.
oh
But yeah, but in other parts of Mexico, it's always warm, and so I don't see why anyone would want to go to a country with like a meter, 2 meters of snow in the winter. But
Probably worth noting to the audience, in case it's not obvious, but Mexicans have visa-free access to Canada, but they do
yes,
not have visa-free access to the United States.
yeah,
yes,
So Mexicans cannot even transit through the United States if they don't have a visa where you have to go to an embassy, blah blah blah. But they can just show up in Canada. They might have to
it's the
show
closest you can get. It's the closest you can get.
it's visa free. They might ask a couple questions like when you going home, blah blah blah. But it's visa free. You can go in. You can go to Canada. Mexicans can like work cash in construction
Yeah.
or restaurants or whatever, or they can sign up for a school and maybe like kind of work towards residency.
Yeah.
Um, just as a footnote, but you know, another point to how it's all integrated as NAFTA or the North American Union, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Mexico is at a special place with no other Latin American country is, precisely because of that. And so, this there's always this saying that we Mexicans say we had a dictator called Porfirio Diaz back in the 1900s, ending of the 19th century, starting in the 20th century, and he said, "Pobre México, tan lejos de Dios y tan cerca de Estados Unidos." And so, yeah, and that stayed. That said until today. It's a common thing to say. And so I, I don't know. It's so entrenched in the ways Mexican thinks to be to be wary of any American presence here. It's kind of just in our genes, yes. And I think it would be in the gringos' genes too if Mexico took half of their land.
Yeah, I mean,
I
the,
think that
the
would be the
history of
same.
it does make sense. That's the funny thing. But then on the flip side, you look like what you said. The history, you get it on a certain level, but then in the present, you're like, I just want to rent an
Yeah, it makes
Airbnb.
no sense. What? Yeah, it
Yeah, I'm like,
makes
I'm
no
just
sense.
renting an Airbnb in a cool place. I mean,
How
like
am I? I'm an invader, a colonizer.
yeah, like I'm just, I booked a flight. I did all my, visa residency as your government requested. I booked my Airbnb, paid my VAT tax, and like, I just want to enjoy life in your country because I like it. But then like, I do understand the other flip side of the coin where, like you said, although it is a small coin because like tourist beach towns, Condesa, Roma Norte.
Hey guys, quick break from the episode to tell you about BitRefill. BitRefill allows you to shop online and in person without banks, converting your crypto directly into merchant balance. We're talking gift cards to Nike, Amazon, Apple, Airbnb, Hotels.com, and many more, all paid for with crypto. BitRefill offers more than 10,000 gift card options in 180 countries, including the USA, Canada, all across Latin America, including Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, El Salvador, and many more. You can also apply the code MyLatinLife at checkout to get 10% back on your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information.
Dude, I,
Yeah,
I saw a video from a white gringa the other day from San Cristobal, and it was the classic, like, white gringa liberal, like, oh, they're so friendly. Oh, they don't have much, but they're so happy. And I'm like, oh my God, shut
beach
the fuck up. Just shut the fuck up.
beach.
Like just classic, like gringa bullshit. I was like, oh, that's not helping.
I think that the same thing is going to happen to Oaxaca. It's already happening now.
Yeah, Puerto.
Everybody wants to move to Oaxaca.
Oaxaca's like one of the highest poverty rates in all of Mexico, one of the poorest states in Mexico. What better opportunity for the state of Oaxaca than to leverage its natural beauty, surfing, food, whatever, and become tourism friendly for Americans? They'll make themselves richer in the process. They'll enrich their land. They'll build buildings. Like
I
where
don't.
what's up?
I don't know. I think Mexicans don't want to be rich because some gringo came to visit. I think it's a matter of pride. There's a reason why Mexico has this huge flags all over the cities. We are a proud people. Like 59 languages spoken in Oaxaca alone. I mean,
No, for sure, for sure. I'm not.
it's yeah, I know it's and so they don't want to, have gringos come in and that be the sole reason of why they develop. They want to have manufacturing and high tech, and they want to have this sort of industrial development that it's in other parts of Mexico. It's not in Oaxaca, and I would argue that the impact of tourism as a way of developing an economy
Mm-hmm.
is not that certain. I mean, if you look at Cancun, for example, Cancun is huge, millions of dollars pour into Cancun, and then
Billion.
you go, and then you go to the suburbs of Cancun, and they're just as poor. as Oaxaca. So I think Mexicans are, they like tourism, but they understand that it's not a silver bullet.
And
You need other things.
it's interesting because, like you said, there tourism is a part of the economy in Mexico, and it does benefit certain individuals. And then, it, like you said, though, that's not. It doesn't raise the economic status of everyone. Uh,
Yeah,
but it's interesting because I do understand why some people say, like, well, I live here and I'm not wealthy and I'm involved in tourism, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of those front facing tourist businesses that gringos see, for example, last time I was in Cozumel, I booked a tour um, to Chichen Itza, right, in Tulum, like the whole day tour. And it was just with this one random Mexican guy. He had his own company, right? He had a website, Instagram, and a tour bus. And he charged us like, I think it was like 500 for the day for three people. And it was like
Jesus.
him, his daughter, his wife. And then they had the expense of gas and they had some expenses. But like, we see that and we're like, well, that dude's probably making 100 grand a year, right? And that's a pretty good salary even in the States, much less than if he was living in Playa del Carmen. So it's kind of, gringos see a different side of tourism a lot of times than what some of the locals see, because we see front facing successful tourist businesses, or like, for example, when I was in Mazatlan, you pay the guy like $600 to go deep sea fishing for 4 hours, right?
Yeah,
And you're like, well, he's probably doing pretty well for himself. So kind of we see a different side of tourism, the successful side of it generally, versus like you said in Cancun, there's billions of dollars going in there, and the slums in Cancun are horrific.
yeah. I think that's the Mexican government, because the development model was, you put in the resorts, you employ people for low wages, gringos have a great experience, and then the dollars remain at the resort, that are, a lot of them are foreign owned, so it's not money does not flow into the local economy as you wish it would. In Oaxaca, I don't think that's going to happen. I think the model is different. Gringos don't want to go to resorts anymore and stay. I mean, a lot of them do, but a lot of them want to go and experience the culture and talk to the people and walk around and buy some shoe, whatever, and try the coffee or the food, and maybe spend a couple of weeks. I mean, live a more local experience, say,
Mm.
and that I think will be very beneficial, especially for cities in Chiapas and Oaxaca.
Mm.
Once things clear out, maybe in Michoacan and in Guerrero, and the potential is huge. I mean, a lot of people are already past the point of saying, "Oh, it's dangerous. I don't want to go there." No, a lot of gringos are venturing in, and buying land here in Guerrero and
Mhm.
Michoacan, all over the place, and
Well,
because yeah. So
it,
I think that's going to be very beneficial, because they're suddenly, employing people for higher wages. They're actually investing in the land, in the local. I think that would be great. I think that money will trickle down.
yeah. Well, and I think what you just talked about with the internet and Twitter, I mean, all these things, people are getting more information. It used to be like you'd show up in a city that you think is safe and you're talking to locals and they're like, don't go here, don't go here, don't go here. And after a while, you start to realize that, a lot of these locals want to have you have a good experience, and they've had like they've been here for 30 years and they've heard of 10 people getting robbed in some city over 30-year time periods, and they're like, oh, it's
Yeah,
horrible, don't go there, gringo. And then the gringos, after a while, because I've been down here for almost 10 years, you're like, I'm just gonna fucking go. And you go and you have a great time and you're like, it didn't feel any different than
yeah,
other city, right? And
Mhm.
so I think
yeah.
a lot of people
Sure.
that have been down here for a while are starting to get a little more adventurous. But what you were talking about just now with Chiapas, Oaxaca, Guerrero, Morelia, Michoacan, is I think a lot of foreigners, and I think Mexico is going to start to follow this a little bit more, is kind of that ecotourism model that Costa Rica implemented, where it's more less of the resorts, less of the partying, less of the, I'm not going to say it, but you know what I'm talking about, and more of
Yeah,
that like conservative ecotourism model, where that does actually have I think a more benefit to the locals because it's not these mega corporations coming in with 5-star hotels and 300 rooms. It's a little bed and breakfast in the mountain. So I think if Mexico kind of goes down that route in certain states, that could be a pretty big benefit for many of the
yeah,
locals.
yeah. I absolutely agree with that. Um, I don't know. I mean, that's why we always encourage people to go and buy a ranchito in Mexico and live the simple life in the mountains. And what we always say is that, and that's this is gonna sound sad, and it is, but it's just the way it is. Gringos don't get killed in Mexico. Mexicans get killed. That's. I mean, organized crime is works very different than what you would find in the inner cities up north in the U.S. or in Canada. It's not disorganized. It's consolidated.
Yeah,
Everyone has a boss, and the overall rule is you don't touch a gringo. You don't touch a gringo because if you touch a gringo, they're gonna come down for me. I mean that's a red line that the DA has put like straight in the ground. You don't touch gringos in Mexico, and that's been around ever since the '80s.
yeah.
Okay, and so it's just the way it is. You as a gringo, you're way safer in all of these parts
That's a
of
very
Mexico.
that's a very interesting point, and I've
And the average Joe in Mexico, I mean, no one's going to touch you. I bet, because Mexico is so surreal, that they will actually try to maybe even do some business with you. I'm literally saying this. Yes, we've had crazy cases of people that move to Guerrero or this places that are a hellhole for that an absolute no go zone, and the narcos there see them and say, "Yeah, we're not. Of course, we're not going to touch this guy. We might just as well make some business with him."
yeah,
It's that happens.
it's interesting you say that because I literally had a conversation at jiu-jitsu in a Mexican gym one time. Um, Basically, the local guy, he was a white Mexican, upper class, and he was kind of like, yeah, I mean, he's like, you see the statistics, you don't seem to give a fuck. I was like, no, not really, because he spoke fluent English, and he was like, yeah, the reality is you're safer here than I am. And I was like, what? And he started
Absolutely.
going into some different stories, and then he basically was like, yeah, like there is a certain I mean, it's not like dead set in stone, but there is a high level of like, just leave gringos alone, let them enjoy their tourism, and try not to bother them as much as possible because it causes too much of it's too much news. It's too much heat. If a gringo dies in Mexico and it's related to
Yeah.
whatever activity. And it was really interesting to hear that a few years back because it's not something a gringo even thinks about. They see the U.S. Travel advisory shit. And they're like, oh, I'm not going to Morelia, or oh, I'm not going to Acapulco, right? But the reality is a little bit different.
Yes. I don't see. I mean, I think it's a really irrational fear. To be honest, gringos get scared very easily stuff. I don't know why they get scared. Um, yeah, it's easy to scare them. And so, there was this occasion when this American girl that I studied with, she went back to the States, uh, uh, came back to visit because she'd been here all her life, and she brought her gringo boyfriend from Montana, and he was scared to death. I mean, I started to making jokes. Oh, well, if something happens, at least we got the gringo. We can ransom him off. And he was so scared. um, yeah, he didn't like. It. But anyway, what I'm
Well,
trying to say is, yeah, what I'm trying to say is that I think it's the I think foreigners are really safe here. It's a safe bet to come and live here. They shouldn't be as scared. and I think Mexicans know that, and that's other reason why they resent that.
Oh
You
yeah,
can walk you can walk in the streets and not get shot, and that isn't precisely my case. You know.
yeah. No, it's interesting too, and it even gets a little bit if you dig a little bit deeper. One of my close family friends is a Mexican American lady. She's been in the states for like 30 years from Reynosa. Reynosa, did I say that right? On the border,
Reynosa, yeah.
Reynosa. Yeah. So I had been in Mexico City. I think it was like 2017 for like a month, and then I went back home for Christmas or whatever. And we were at a Christmas party together, and she was like, "You went to Mexico City? It's so dangerous there." And I'm like, no, it's far, far safer than any big city in the United States I've been to, like in the past 5 years. She's like, oh, no, it used to be like super dangerous, et cetera, et cetera. I was like, I was stumbling drunk around like 5, 6 different neighborhoods there and had absolutely no problem. And she was baffled. And so
Yeah.
it's again, it kind of goes back to that point where like locals or they have this such large time frame of memories and of stories that they think like they're way more scared than a gringo because a gringo comes down, he's walking around the big city, and it's chill. Mexican big cities are very chill. Like you go to a nice neighborhood in Mexico in a big city, Guadalajara, Monterrey, Mexico City. There's no danger in Condesa, Roma Norte, Polanco, Americana, Providencia, Andares, San Pedro Garza Garcia. You walk around those areas, it's way safer than most of similar areas of the United States from a feel standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, in all fairness, I mean, the case of Mexico City, it has become much more safer over the last 3 years than it has ever been. I mean, I think the crime rate in the city has plummeted to its lowest
Bro,
in history. A lot of
direct
us suspect,
correlation.
yeah,
Direct
yeah, yeah.
correlation between Pilates studios and safety. Direct.
That might have an interesting effect, which is the more gringos come into Mexico, the safer it becomes for Mexico. I don't know. I don't know if that would be a thing. But I certainly think that what's going to happen over the next years is that effect won't last. To be honest, as gringos integrate more into society, they will take more risks. They will live in neighborhoods, and so I don't think that trend will remain. And quite honestly, um, you know, I think it's going to be similar as to Brazil, which is that crime is not as consolidated in Brazil, and so it's easier, to like do petty crime to a gringo, right? And getting away with it. Something
What?
that is sure. Go ahead.
So I have a question about that because yeah, Brazil and even in certain parts of Colombia, although Colombia has been changing rapidly,
Yeah,
there is more street crime than there is
yeah,
in Mexico.
yeah.
And
Absolutely.
but then you look at the statistics, right? And you're like, Mazatlan some years has a pretty high murder rate. But if I've been there in times like 2018, I think it was like the 37th highest murder rate in the world. And it was pretty chill. Like there was really
Yeah,
no,
because not everyone's getting killed. I mean, the guys that are getting killed in Mazatlan are the guys from Jalisco that try to get into the plaza
yeah,
and get into the turf of the Sinaloa cartel, and so they get killed.
yeah,
Those are the guys that are getting shot, not your average American buying a Starbucks. It's not. It's not. It's not just not the case.
yeah.
So data can be really deceiving. I think Vance made thread, a Twitter thread, and then we kind of copied that some months ago about the chance of an American dying. I mean, the death rate for Americans in Mexico.
Hmm.
and it was, I think it was something
It
like
was
two
like two
percent.
guys. It was
Yeah,
like
two
it was
people died.
it was like
Uh,
2 out of 2 million. It was something so absurdly low
Knock
that I
on
was
wood.
like
Knock on wood.
there's no way. It might have been like 16 max over a
yeah,
whole year of millions of tourists. And when Americans are touristing in Mexico, that's not a normal week for an American. Like they're normally going hard and doing dumb shit. And so when you have like millions of Americans going hard and doing dumb shit and like only 16 people die, it was lower than if they stayed at home, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I think your chances of dying in an airplane crash are similar to your chances of dying if you was that was the size of the risk. It was 0.0040 something.
Dude, it was so low it didn't make sense. Like if someone just looks up number of Americans that have died in Mexico or number of Canadians, it's like you would have almost thought that retirees would have just, maybe passed away in Mexico at a higher rate. You know what I mean?
Dude, that's such a good. And the funny thing is, right? All like boomer gringos have that impression Mexico's super dangerous, right? And I've
Sure.
got some kids down here, and my mom started visiting like every 2 months. So the first time we got her to visit, and we weren't like at a resort in Mexico, right? She was like stressed, right? She's like, "Can you pick me up from the airport?" Da 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 da. I'm like, "All right, yeah, you don't have anything to worry about, but all right." Now she comes down. We're going to like quote unquote a dangerous beach town in Mexico like every time she comes down, and she loves it. And she's like, "Why do people say it's dangerous here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's Mexico where the street crime is not the same as the violent crime, which is a certain subset of society." And now that she understands that, she's just way more comfortable down here.
Hey everybody, hey everybody. Quick break from the podcast to tell you about Language Blend, the best new way to learn Spanish. Language Blend was co-founded by Jake Nomada, friend of the podcast, decade of experience in Latin America, and Jake and his team, they put everything into this program that they wish they had in terms of how to level up quickly with your Spanish language skills. Because the faster that you can get conversationally fluent in Spanish, the better the experience that you're going to have in Latin America. So go to languageblend.com for more information.
Yeah, I think that all adds up to. I think the conversation naturally went into security. Um, I think that Mexicans absolutely know that. As I said, they resent that. It all adds up. And so, to be honest, I don't know what's going to happen.
Nobody does.
I don't know what's going to happen. I think gringos will keep moving here. I think they will keep spending money. A lot of them are going to have kids here. We know like 5 couples that decided to open a fondita, a barber. I mean, these are small businesses. They're not. I mean, but they didn't have the money to do that in the states, like open their own thing. But they do have it here,
Yeah.
and so a lot of them are becoming small business owners. I think that's a trend that's going to continue. They're going to settle down, have their business. That business is going to grow, and they will slowly but surely become integrated into Mexican society. And the dynamic is going to change for them. And so, yeah, I saw a projection from the State Department that they expect the gringo population to reach over 5 million by 2040, something like that
Really?
in Mexico. Yeah,
5
Like
million?
living like full
five
time.
million, which is a
It's less than
percentage of the
2 right
population.
now, I think.
Yeah, it's a percentage of the population.
Would that
That's
be
a
like
chunk.
almost like 4% of the population, right?
That would be like 4% of the population. I mean, this is a voting block right there.
Yeah.
It's gonna be crazy. So, at least I know I'm in the right business. But others, no one's really gonna happen. I think that the first step would be for all these gringos to aprender un poquito de español y saber qué
Claro
pedo.
que sí.
See, and that would be a good first step.
Well, and I think it's interesting too from that perspective. before remote work really took off, it was mainly like retirees that were moving to Mexico in their 50s and 60s, right? And if you hear those gringos now, they still speak horrible Spanish. Like it's like, you know,
Yeah, but they were old.
yeah, yeah. But I think you have a new subset of these remote workers that are taking Spanish far more seriously because they do have the idea that they're potentially going to integrate in society and live long term in Mexico or some of these other Latin American countries. And so it will be interesting. Nobody really knows how that's going to play out. Where, you know, like Vance and myself, I have like a B3 level Spanish, maybe a C1, depending. I think Vance is pretty similar in that we can carry on hour-long conversations in Spanish. You know, my girlfriend doesn't speak a lot of English, and we understand the benefit and the value of speaking Spanish and living in these countries, and how you can actually develop friendships and
We should
relationships.
make a podcast in Spanish for Mexican audiences. I think that would be great.
Yeah,
That would explode because Mexicans don't know English. It's this very small percentage. More Argentinians know English as a percentage of the population than Mexicans.
which is
So they want
crazy.
to, yeah, and so they want to know. They want to know what gringos think.
Yeah,
You just can't. So
yeah.
yo lo haría en español. Sale.
Oh,
También
yeah.
do that.
No, that's a good idea. We could definitely put that together as well because I do think there's going to be a big shift between the retired boomer gringos who come down here and they you know they're looking for a low cost of living, cheap retirement type scenario versus some of the remote workers or online business people that are going to move here and are going to make an attempt to kind of fully integrate into society, learn Spanish, develop
Yeah.
relationships,
Mm.
have children. And I think that's going to be a big difference
I
between
think
what was happening.
both groups, like you're always going to be a bit like one foot in, one foot out. Do you think,
Yeah.
Jake? Do you have any idea, Jake or Mauricio, what the breakdown is currently and where you project it might go in terms of officially retirees living in Mexico as expats versus, I guess, just anything non-retirees that we can call digital nomads? Like, do we have an idea of what that breakdown is
Yeah.
currently, and then what we expect in the future?
I do. We just finished a market research for a huge medical tourism resort that's going to open. Hopefully next few years. Yeah, yeah. It's going to be big.
Sick, bro.
Sick.
Maybe I shouldn't be saying this. I signed it. Yeah, it's gonna be pretty big, and we think it's going to be almost half and half. 60% is going to be retirees, 40% is going to be younger people. That cadre of people is going to be split kind of evenly between nomads, entrepreneurs, and tourists that are longer stay. We're talking about more than 3 months. And I think that's going to be the ratio, and it's going to be so huge because boomers are retiring in mass,
Yeah, I mean that's growing
uh,
too. Yeah,
and so just that huge demographic by itself is going to displace the entire other percentages because it's millions and millions of people that have a lot of savings and they're so bored of the states. A lot of them are politically paranoid and they're all sick, and so it has all converged so that they move here of some sort.
Yeah. Well, and that's a huge industry that's, I mean, taking off like crazy. I mean, the
Yeah.
stem cell stuff in Mexico
Oh yeah.
got to be $100
Yeah.
million more market. I mean, that you
Yeah.
got the guys in Tijuana, Puerto
Absolutely.
Vallarta. I mean, it's all over where every single like tourist beach town in Mexico has a state of the art stem cell clinic at this point. It's kind of like like pretty high level stem
Yeah.
cell clinic. It's kind of crazy to think about. I've got stem cells in Mexico myself, so it's interesting. But no, I
I think
think
that isn't that banned in the U.S.
it's yeah. There's a I don't know the
I mean,
I'm not going to get into the specifics, but there's a certain style of stem cell that you can use in Mexico that I think you maybe cannot in the United States. So that's why people are like, "Fuck it, let's go to Mexico get stemmed up." And
It's like the gym bros that come here to get
Jake is
all
integrated. He
all
has
their
Mexican
drugs.
cells in him.
yeah, I've got those Mexican stem cells, man. It's part of the naturalization process, man. You got to inject Mexican stem cells.
Do you
Okay.
drink Coca-Cola now?
Dude, I do Coke Zero though. Coke Zero, man. Come on.
Okay, well,
I don't live in Chiapas, dude. I can't. I see that statistic about Coca Cola in Chiapas, and I'm like, oh my gosh,
that is crazy. That is
it's
absolutely
nuts.
crazy.
Like it's
If they
so
did a
nuts.
study about the population around the world that most drinks Coke, I think Chiapas would be up there in the list.
Oh, it's got to be top three. Yeah, like it was.
Absolutely.
Random
So,
question: do they make any rum in Chiapas? Make a rum and Coke? I feel like
They
it's
do.
tropical enough to make rum.
They do. My grandmother grew up in a sugarcane plantation in Chiapas, well, close to one, and so they do great. They do grow a lot of sugar, and so there's sugar, there's liquor. So I think, yeah,
Ron with the
I think
rum.
Guatemalan Rome is
Yeah,
so,
yeah, that's like the national
uh,
drink down there.
yeah,
I mean, I'm
because
partial to Nicaraguan rum. I think that Florida Cana, that stuff's good. That's
yeah.
premier. That's
Yeah,
premier,
so
man.
Chiapas is not big on rum. I mean, it's mostly moonshine liquor.
It's funny because it's on the border of Guatemala.
Yeah, so the weather is similar, but somehow I don't know why there's no rum industry. It's not just a big thing. There's a large
We're gonna have to
Totonayan
dig into
industry.
that. We're gonna have to dig into
Yeah,
that.
That's
Hmm.
interesting. Yeah.
Guys,
No,
I
I mean,
wanted to take this moment to announce my my candidacy for the governor of the state of Veracruz. I'm gonna run.
shut up,
I'm gonna
shut up,
run for
Vance.
governor. I'm gonna run for
You're
governor.
really pushing some buttons so the people of Veracruz
yeah.
don't want to be. Yeah, they don't want a gringo as
I'm gonna run.
Let's announce that on the
and
Spanish version of this
yeah,
podcast.
and we have a local meme here in Mexico, which the Veracruz people are all like fishes and crabs, and it's kind of a local thing. It's
Wait,
called
what?
a
Can
local
you break
joke.
this down?
Yeah, there's this meme thing going around in Mexico because Mexican memes are the best memes in the world once you get them.
Spanish meme, yeah, Spanish language
Spanish
memes.
memes
Like,
are much better than American memes. They're so lame. Um, and so there's this joke going around that because Veracruz is a state that kind of stole all the seas, from the other states. It's so long, so it covers most of the Gulf of Mexico.
Hmm.
That all the people of Veracruz are somehow descendants of fish. It's a stupid thing, and so they're all crabs or or some sort of sea life. Um,
Jaivas.
oh,
yeah, and so uh,
yeah,
you see memes when they see, there's like this painting and there's a guy eating, like, I don't know, crab or a jaiba or something. Yo pensando en mi futuro, and then there's this fish saying y un pinche jarocho or so something like that. so, and so it's a dumb thing. It's a thing. I wouldn't run for the governor of Veracruz. It's a pain in the ass. You don't want to go to that state. Politically wise, it's a mess.
that's the funny thing about Veracruz. I've known like 4 or 5 dudes from Veracruz through just like jujitsu and stuff. And every one of them, as I've never been to Veracruz, and I ask about Veracruz, and they're like, don't go, it's awful, blah blah blah. And then I talked every single foreigner I talked to that goes to Veracruz, like Veracruz, pretty sick, like it's a pretty cool place.
Yeah,
And so it's a weird thing where like the locals that left aren't huge fans, but then the foreigners are like, no, Veracruz kind of cool.
yeah, it's great. The port, it's so beautiful. It has this Havana vibe because the buildings are old, and it's yeah, it has this Cuban vibe to it. And
Hmm.
the mountains are great. I know Vance is a big fan of mountains for whatever reason. And the coffee is amazing. That's the beaches are meh. They're not great,
Yeah.
but it's a really nice state.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see the foreigner perspective on certain places versus the local perspective. Because sometimes like a local will be like, oh, that place sucks, And then the foreigners go there and they're like, no, this place fucking great, man. What are you talking about?
Veracruz has this. I mean, it's. I have this dilemma because the tourist areas are nice, but gringos don't venture out to the other areas, which are horrible. They're hellholes. They're this industrial areas full of narcos and strip clubs, and you don't. And so
Wait,
yeah,
maybe that's why the gringos like it.
yeah, maybe that's there we go. The wrong type though, but yeah, it's not. Veracruz is, and
Well,
I love my friends from Veracruz. Quiero mucho, pinches jarochos, but it's still not the. I mean, apart from the capital city, and the port, the rest of the state is not great.
no, I think there's some sick spots. I think there's some sick spots. But instead of
There's good
instead of
spots.
making this like a Veracruz podcast, because I mean it might
I
not be
would.
the best use of our time, but random thought: what if Gringo, naturalized as Mexican citizen, ran for governor or something like that, and his policy was just like, I'm
You get
like
more votes.
I'm bringing American logic, like it's like
You would
I
get
mean,
more
anything
votes,
can
man.
happen. Anything can happen. I'm not gonna do my politics. That's too controversial. But if AMLO could win, anyone can win. And
you have to
if
be
there's
handsome. That's what I've learned about Mexican politics. They just like a handsome guy.
yeah, that's why Enrique won
Yeah,
some years ago. But yeah, he was. Yeah, you also gotta marry some telenovela star,
yeah, that
Uh,
helps.
and
I
and,
mean,
and
that gets
people really
worse.
like that.
If
Yeah.
that's what you have to do, like that's a horrible fate. Like just a horrible, horrible fate.
Or influencer like the Monterey guy.
Yeah, Samuel Garcia
Yeah.
is. I like him. He's really funny. I just make fun of him. Anyway, yeah, yeah. You could run. You could win. Uh, I don't think it would be constitutional for you to run as president, uh, but I think you can be a good governor if you want. I think you would be
The, the,
a decent governor. Yeah.
the
We'll be the
last
shadow
thing,
government.
literally the last thing I would want in life is to be involved in politics in any country, much less
Yeah.
like as a naturalized citizen somewhere. Like that, just please no. Like I just want to have a nice, peaceful life, a little casita at the beach. Like just leave me alone, you know. Like that'd be the last thing I'd want.
Hmm.
I think all of you guys want that. It's trend I've seen. You all want to be like I. I mean, when I mean you, I mean the no, and the gringos in general. They all want to be like left alone in some nice beach town with a
This is a good
seaside
topic.
property.
This is a good topic
Yeah,
because Mexico is a good place if you just want to chill, have a quiet life, eat seafood,
yeah.
whatever. But if
Yeah.
you actually want to be a notable person in your life and be out there, Mexico might not be the best place to do that. Or it's like a little, it's a bit of a tougher situation when you're a higher
Yeah, it's
profile
not.
person.
It's not. Yeah, it's if you're a high profile and a high spender. I think some parts of Mexico would be great. There's a friend of mine who's also really active on Twitter. His name is Jaime, and I kind of hate him, but I love him at the same time. And Jaime, he's from Monterrey, and that's exactly his point. If you're a high spender, a high earner, if you want to get a bit famous, San Pedro Garza and Monterrey are the place to do it.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of everything for everyone. I'd say that Guadalajara is just as good for that as well. I don't know, but I think that if you really want the Latino get rich vibe, Panama.
Hey guys, quick interruption to tell you about BitRefill. BitRefill is the best way to convert your crypto into gift card balances. These are gift cards that you can spend at hotels.com, Airbnb, Nike, and many more. You may remember Joel Valenzuela, previous podcast guest. He's been living on crypto exclusively since 2015, and he's a big consumer of BitRefill. And so I asked Joel, I said, what do you like most about BitRefill? He said that he likes the instant delivery, the precise amount so that you don't have to juggle a lot of gift cards, and he loves the global selection. Nobody else has this much selection of gift cards, over 10,000 gift card options across hundreds of countries. Go to bitrefill.com to sign up. And you can also use the code MyLatinLife for 10% back off your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information.
It's not my
Yeah, I
language.
mean, I think a lot of gringos that move to Mexico, like you just said, kind of just want that like casita by the beach, integrate with the people that are living there, have a chill life, make a little money online, have their kids, their girl, whatever. And that's I think a lot of the what a lot of gringos are looking for to a certain extent. I don't think most I mean, I don't know any gringos other than the ones that are famous on YouTube or whatever, want to come down to Mexico or Latin America and be famous or do this or that. They're just like, no, it's cool down here. It's chill. The people are friendly. The
Yeah.
vibe's good. So I think the vast majority, and that's I think where a little bit of the confusion is when I got some of the anger I did. I'm like, I like your country. I like your culture. I like your food. I like your people. And I'm just living a chill life here. Right. And so it was kind of, that was the biggest thing for me is like the desire of the average gringo living in Mexico versus how some of it is viewed, which was one of the most confusing things.
I wouldn't pay much. I mean, most Mexicans love gringos. They
Oh
love them.
yeah. Yeah.
We absolutely love them. We buy their
Twitter,
food.
Twitter,
We
Twitter
buy their
Mexicans
meat.
are different.
I mean, it's to Twitter to the Twitter liberal Mexicans because they can't be as cool as them. That's really the reason. And that's just the
Wait,
way it
wait,
is.
wait. I think we're winding down here, but let's do bring up the biggest difference that I noticed is the left wing Mexicans or Latinos versus the left wing Westerners, because it's
Oh, God.
completely
Oh,
different.
Now commencing the segment, 50% chance I'm going to have to cut out. But Jake, please continue.
I can't. I can talk about the Mexican left, but as a Mexican, I can talk about the. Although I know it well, I have my
Yeah.
opinions, but I
Well,
don't
you
think it would be wise to talk
give
about
me the 30
foreign policy.
second Mexican left wing point of view, and I want to see if it correlates with what I saw. With all the because that's who it was on Twitter, all mad at me was left wing Mexicans 95% or whatever. So let me hear
Okay.
your take on that.
I mean, how do they think, or
Well,
what's
kind
my
of their
take on them?
viewpoint, because I just noticed a couple things that were vastly different.
I would say that the typical leftist Mexican guy would say something like Mexico has been exploited and denied its economic growth for centuries because of the US. And the US does not want to have a strong and powerful Mexico. And so there's this kind of idea, this kind of plan that, Mexico must be permanently must stay poor for us to exploit its resources and its cheap labor. And so gringos moving here are kind of riding that wave of privilege, and they're perpetuating the exploitation of Mexico and Mexico in general, which has been pillaged. My view of that is that these guys are idiots, and if they really wanted to do something for Mexico, instead of complaining, they would actually go out and do something. I mean, we have a lot of problems that are caused because we as Mexicans really need to get our shit together and work some solutions. And this idea that there's some external force that's denying us access to that, I think it's not realistic. So that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was definitely the biggest thing I noticed is that the left wing in Mexico, to a certain level, was very nationalist. Like
Oh yeah,
Mexico
yeah,
for Mexicans,
absolutely.
right? Like they were like Mexico for Mexicans, nationalist, like foreigners, et cetera, et
Yeah,
cetera.
state owned. Yeah,
It
I
wasn't
agree.
like all the weird shit in the States. Like you didn't see all these trans this, open borders this, et cetera, et cetera. There was a huge difference, even though they were clearly like a kind of like a liberal left wing vibe, but they were nationalist. Whereas in the States, completely different.
But the right is a patriotic one. And
Yeah.
there's this. I, as a Mexican, don't understand those debates. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. I should, but I don't understand at all. I mean, one side is accusing the other side of wanting the other side to impose eating bugs or something like that, and everyone else. I mean, it's crazy that the level of debate you guys, and so the globalists and all this rhetoric. I just don't. It's beyond me how your left and right fell into this
Yeah,
debate.
it's
It's
completely flipped from like the '90s in the states. Like in the '90s, the what do you want to call them, left wing or Democrats or whatever, were like anti-government, anti-corruption, da 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 da, and then
yeah.
it's completely changed, and so it's interesting. But it was just crazy for me to see the Mexican or the Latino side of that and see how different it was versus the crazy shit we have going on in the states.
Yeah, I don't know if it's similar in Canada, but at least in Mexico, we get really it's we don't understand your politics at all. It's really hard for us to
We don't
comprender.
either. I don't
Yeah,
understand our politics either at this
and
point.
that's it. And it's if it's hard for Mexicans to understand U.S. politics, it's almost impossible for a gringo to understand Mexican
Yeah.
politics. It's absolutely impossible. So I wouldn't even try.
No.
It's a failed
Well,
attempt.
like I put something out like because I had mentioned it one time at jiu-jitsu, like, oh, AMLO's cool, like he kept Mexico open, da 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 da
Oh
da, and
shit!
like
Oh shit!
all the upper class Mexicans are like, fuck that, all
Oh
mad at
shit!
AMLO and I'm mad at me, and I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna say that anymore. Like,
Yeah, don't do that. You're not gonna get killed because you started some Twitter brawl. You're gonna get killed because you started talking about AMLO. That's you don't do that. You don't do that. No,
yeah,
no.
yeah, I
And
learned that
elections
lesson.
are
I'm like,
coming up, and it's gonna be a tough year.
yeah, no,
Everyone gets it.
no, no, I'm definitely won't be saying that ever again.
Yeah, of
Hmm.
course. Well,
Cool.
some
If I had
final
to,
thought.
yeah. So we'll start wrapping up. Would love to switch gears a bit. We're just here at Jake once again. So I mean, you went viral in Mexico, kind of bringing it back to how we started things off at the beginning of the episode. Um, how did you grow from the experience? What have what have been some of the aha moments or the some thoughts that you've had from your recent viral experience?
Yeah, I mean, I never try to go viral, so it's not like I'm trying to go viral or I was in like fucking Millennial and all these famous TikTokers and like there are like 15 news articles. I was very happy that Millennial put a good photo of me. Like that was fantastic. Um but reality of it was like I don't want to go viral and I'm going to try not to in the future because I there's no benefit for me or for most gringos to like go viral in a country you're not anywhere really, but in a country you're not a citizen of. That was one of the things. And I mean, a couple of the bigger ones were like the differences between the left wing and Mexico and Latin America versus the States. And the reality is I've never had a personal experience in Mexico where people did not like me or were openly aggressive towards me because I was gringo. And obviously, so there's like a huge disconnect between Twitter and the real world. We know that, but that was definitely a shining light. I did get recognized at the mall a couple times
Really? How'd
after
that go?
being in Millennial.
How'd
Yeah,
that go? How'd that go?
literally the first time I was walking with my kids, right, and I see like these people pointing at me. There were these two young girls and these two guys, and the one girl was pointing at me, and I look over and they're all like looking at me, like like looking at me and whispering, and I'm like, oh fuck, like they clearly saw one of those TikToks or those articles, and they're like, oh, there's the bald, semi-muscular gringo, like and the I don't like it because a few of the people like purposely had bad translations of what I said. And I
Yeah.
was like, that's bullshit. Like, because I'm saying basically if prices double in Mexico for gringos, a lot of gringos will be forced to leave. And then some dude on Instagram's like, this gringo says all Mexicans are poor. I'm like, that is not what I said at all. And so I didn't feel comfortable getting recognized because I didn't know if they read like a few of the articles were pretty fair, but then there was some bullshit translation. So I was like, I'm just going to get in my Uber and head back home after that. So that's how that went.
Hmm.
I think you could be a great Mexican influencer. I think a lot of people would follow you. Yeah. I think you could I think if
Well,
you try to tap into that market, you would totally like yeah,
What,
it
have
would
you ever
work.
tried to get in like a Mexican movie or novella, Jake? Do you think that that could be a
no, I
Oh
don't want.
yeah.
I
that
don't
could
want
work
any of
for
these
dude? They
things.
That could
need they
work
need
a lot
a
for you. You
stereotypical
already
guy.
have precedent. You already are
Yeah, be like
viral.
the fucking just like run some steroids, be like the John Cena of like Mexican
I
movies, and like,
I know.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
I
Mark Wahlberg.
yes. Yes, I know.
oh look, it's
I
the it's the
know
it's the
there's this
steroid out gringo with the shitty Spanish accent in our movies. Oh no, I
I
do
know
not want
there's
that.
this American guy that really, I mean, couldn't get his career of the ground in the States, but he tried in China, and now he's in every Chinese movie, and he plays the American dude. And yeah, the bad American guy. I think he could do the same.
Oh, I
He
could
could,
definitely do the same. I got like the bald hair, the muscles, like I'm
yeah,
everything. The it's funny you say that. I had a friend like 5 years ago. We were living in Bogota, right? In Colombia, and he spoke fluent Spanish, and somehow he got connected with a producer there for a big TV show, and he ended up playing the like bad European for like 2 years on this TV show, and he would get recognized in like public all the time because it was a pretty big show, and his take was like that is awful, and so I don't want anything to do with that. I actually have a TikTok video about Monterrey, and I said, like, it's got that norteño vibe. It's got a very strong Mexican norteño vibe. And that pissed off like 1,000 people. And they're like, oh, you're saying that's negative. I'm like, no, I'm just kind of saying that a lot of gringos, not myself personally, go to gentrified beach towns in Mexico City, Condesa, Roma Norte. That's not what they like. Me personally, I don't have a problem with it, but it pissed off a lot of people. So I was like, all right.
Hmm. So if I had to
Mhm.
kind of conclude a little bit, sounds like everyone agrees that the trend is only going to continue, both of retirees and of younger people moving to Mexico, and maybe the rise in the Mexican peso in the past year is somewhat of a temporary deterrent, I guess, but doesn't impact the long term trend of continued Americans in Mexico, and
Yeah,
of course of probably continued integration of Mexico into the I don't know, the financial system, the economic system of North America, and everyone's going to continue being best cousins.
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't really
Like
see.
kind of yeah, like a forced friendship. No one wanted it in the first place, but now we.
Yeah, that
It's,
border, there's nothing that's going to change that. I think both sides benefit from it economically. So at a government level, they're not going to change a lot. So it's kind of like we can learn to speak each other's languages and integrate as much as possible. But again, it's out of the individual control. You know what I mean? So I think that's the biggest thing. And overall, I mean, I think a lot of at least my audience and Vance's audience, and I think most of your clients, Mauricio, they like living in like foreigners. They like living in Mexico. They like living in Latin America. They're choosing to live here. Um,
yeah,
and so I think that was kind of an interesting. I think that was a maybe one of the biggest things is that we're choosing to come down here and live here because we do like it. We like the culture. We like the vibes, the lifestyle, the people, the food, and so I think that's going to continue.
absolutely. Yeah, it's a good wrap up.
Good stuff. So Jake's gonna do his best to not go viral in the future. Probably still gonna happen.
It's going to happen,
Um,
sadly.
he's gonna also try his best to not get on a major Mexican Netflix show, but we're all we're all hoping it happens.
I think a Televisa program with classic the telenovela sort of thing, like the
Tele-
soap opera.
I mean, the only
Yeah.
thing I would consider is a telenovela. Like I could be the bad American in a telenovela. I
Oh,
could
of
do.
course, like the owner of this hacienda. Or
That's bad. That's bad. That's bad.
yeah, yeah.
No, I see him more as like it's just like, hola, soy el novio de tu hermana, soy de Estados Unidos, and like I don't know.
Oh
me
yeah.
gusta, me gusta tacos and tequila. Like no,
Y
but
stem cells.
Rosa de
the
Guadalupe fan.
yeah, and stem cells, dude. Last thing, and we need to say this. We need to say this on the Spanish version of this. Gringos have this conception of Mexico where it's like tacos, tequila, beaches, and violence, right? All this bullshit. Those, to me personally, are not the biggest things in Mexico. The biggest thing as a foreigner when you live in Mexico, the biggest culture shock is how many fucking topes are all over Mexico.
And different
That's
styles. Different styles. There's like
oh,
8 styles of topes. There's
oh bro,
No, there's not a style of tope. I actually know this story for some reason. It's sad, but it's like Mexico in a nutshell. There was this factory of Mercedes Benz, this huge plant in Guanajuato some years ago, and they were trying to build this German car that would be exported to Europe,
okay.
and they couldn't test it in Mexico because of the topes. Right, it was its height was so low, and so the German engineers said, "Okay, that's fine. We can elevate the height of the car a bit, but all we need is the standard tope size of Mexico." Like this German idea that it was, there has to there has to be a standard tope. And the Mexican engineers came up with this study, and I don't know what. There's 58 types of tope in Mexico.
Is that true?
Yeah, that is not bullshit. There's 58 types because every municipality
and if you don't speak
has its
Spanish,
own kind of design.
Wow.
So they kind of summed it all up, and they sent Germany this huge file with 58 designs. At the end, the car was not built here. They shut the plant down. It was impossible.
it wasn't viable. Yeah, and for
Yeah,
people
like
that
a $5 billion
Spanish,
car plant in Mexico was shut down. We didn't know the tope size. There was no standard tope size.
and tope is speed bumps for anybody that doesn't speak
Oh yeah.
Spanish. So if you own a car or rent a car in Mexico, you will quickly get acquainted with the pure quantity of topes everywhere. I'll tell last story, then we'll go. I went to Palenque to see the ruins down there, and then we drove the car from Palenque to Yaxchilian. You have to get on the boat, go down there. It was a 2-hour drive, and the topes were so prevalent on the way back. I counted them. In a 2-hour drive of like 100 some kilometers, there was like 160 some topes. Like literally every kilometer was a tope. And so that's my Mexican tope story.
I've seen people put topes in front of their houses because they don't like anyone can put a tope.
Speeding.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, that's
yeah,
the
yeah,
thing
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
they just put them anywhere, right?
Yeah,
So it's
you put them in front of the street and you say, well, es que aquí aceleran mucho, pinches. So that's what you do. You put a tope, or you fill this paint bucket with concrete. That's also a way of doing it, and you put it in the middle of the street. And so that's also a way of making it slow down. Now you have an obstacle. Yeah, that's the thing in Mexico City.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's definitely a change for foreigners that come to Mexico
yeah,
and start driving. It's a unique
yeah.
thing.
Okay.
The tope culture.
All right. Well, any last thoughts, conclusions? I want to go to the beach.
Dude, yeah, go enjoy Extapa. Those beaches are
Yeah,
incredible.
really
Have
nice.
a wonderful. I hope you have a great sunset tonight.
Yeah, it's just happening now, so I gotta go.
All right. Hey, thank you
Sunset.
guys.
All right.
Sick.
Well,
Well, yeah. Just to wrap it up. Little bit of a mixed bag episode here with Jake Nomada and Mauricio from Outbound Mexico. Again, Outbound Mexico is a sort of a tax and legal advisory firm, pretty much a one stop shop in Mexico City for expats looking for services, whether you want to open up a company in Mexico, whether you want to get residency in Mexico for yourself and your family. Maybe you want to buy a property. Maybe you need a fideicomiso. Mauricio and his team can pretty much do everything. So we highly recommend Mauricio and Outbound Mexico for all services related to Mexico and laws and all that good stuff. And if you mention My Latin Life, if you mention Jake Nomada, you're going to get treated even better. We're going to leave all the ways to contact Mauricio in the show notes of the episode. If you mention Jake, you mention My Latin Life, maybe you get a discount, maybe you just get treated better. We'll
Oh
see how it
yes, they they
some
they
good.
get the
And
special
also,
treatment.
they
Okay.
got that. They got a nice service where if you're living in Mexico, you can send. If you're buying a car, if you're getting insurance, any little thing that you need, some type of contract looked over. Mauricio and his team are fully bilingual. They can check that contract, make sure everything's good. So that's a lifesaver, to be honest.
Yeah.
It is.
Mauricio, do
It
you want
is.
to tell us a little bit more about this service, top down?
Well,
You put this out
it's
recently. It's the first I've heard of
yeah,
it from any
yeah.
provider. It's kind of a new product idea. I think it sounds really cool.
It's a thing that we came up with. So basically, lawyers are expensive pretty much anywhere. And so what if you could, buy a monthly subscription service like some sort of membership where you get access to all of our services, but it's also an insurance, right? So if something ever happens to you, if that's not great, and if you get into a big kind of a problema that needs a lawyer, we represent you as part of that membership. And of course there's like this there's we always encounter this the same 200 questions of people that come here regarding taxes, regarding property, regarding opening a company, et cetera. And so we built this very handy guides that are in English for you to kind of know what's up in Mexico, for you to know how to move around and be safe in any way, not just physically safe, but legally safe, and to reduce your
Yeah.
taxes as much as possible, etc. So we built those, and of course we provide also 24/7 like assistance in terms of um, anything that's logistical, so like a virtual assistance type of thing, and also any legal consultation that you might have, any question. And we also provide unlimited document reviews, which I know Jake is a big fan of that. So yeah,
Yeah, that's huge if you're living here.
yeah, if you have a contract, if you have insurance policy, any sort of legal document that you don't understand because Mexican legal Spanish is horrible. And
It's hard
you
to
could
understand.
just send that to us and we'll explain. We just launched a month ago. It's again, it's $75 a month, and I believe you, Jake, and you, Vance, have an affiliate link for that. So that's going to offer you a small discount there. And if you would like to join as an affiliate, I mean, I think anyone can join an affiliate. So yeah, that's up there for anyone who wants to get it.
Sick. Well, thanks again, Mauricio, for joining us. Jake Nomada as well. All the links will be in the show notes where you guys can get in contact with Jake or Mauricio. If you're from Netflix Mexico, please get in touch with Jake to get him on some sort of program. And for all
Don't do
other services in Mexico, please contact Mauricio. That service sounds pretty cool if you're in the process of maybe buying a house or establishing
Oh
yourself
yeah.
more in Mexico. Tons of stuff. So lots of good value from the team. Hope everyone enjoyed. This has been another episode of My Latin Life podcast. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks.